This is Remote Ruby.
Have you any remote idea to the meaning of the word?
You like that pro move right there?
It was a pro move.
Just start recording.
It's like you've been doing this for a few years.
We've been doing this for a while.
Couple weeks, that's for sure.
Definitely at least a week. I recorded my first Ruby podcast in 2018. It was a podcast on mental health and psychology that I tried to record with a psychology and neuroscience student that I knew at college.
How did that go?
It went, we'd never released it. Like we recorded one or two. I found all the notes the other day I had on it.
My first podcast was in 2005 and I had 4 episodes.
2005?
Wow.
So cringy.
I was in high school.
I was 9.
I was 16, 17, somewhere in there.
Dang. I would love to hear a podcast of myself from high school because it would be all equally cringy. I would like nobody else to hear it, but just me.
One of my friends still has it on his video iPod that he still has.
Oh, the good old iPod.
When's it getting uploaded to YouTube?
Yeah.
As soon as I hack in.
Or Spotify?
Spotify.
I went to the Apple store yesterday because this is the second time my AirPods just like vibrate a whole bunch when I talk, only for them to tell me, yeah, they both failed the audio test and it's $90 per earbud to replace.
Why are they charging?
Because I wasn't in some like range of serial numbers. Well, there's some range of serial numbers that were put into this like special replacement plan and mine wasn't. And I was like, well, why isn't it there? And he's like, I don't know. But it's $180 or a brand new pair for like $340. Yeah.
New pair.
Beautiful. Worth it.
Yeah. So now I have this $200 fidget toy that are my old AirPods.
I had
like
another
keeping
pair
your old teeth after they get surgically removed. I had so many like baby teeth surgically removed. Somewhere probably at my parents' house, they have these little treasure chest things that they give you your teeth in. And I had like 4 of them because I had to go have my teeth pulled like 4 times because they just never fell out.
Do they still have them?
I don't know. I hope so. Just like my old podcast, I really want my old teeth. Jackson got his first tooth the other day, so we'll have to make sure we keep his old teeth for his future podcast to talk about.
Hey.
You know?
And that's Remote Ruby.
Welcome and goodbye.
Maybe I can start him early and I can record a podcast with him at 6 months. And then later on, when he is older, he'd be like, yeah, my first podcast was at 6 months old.
Like ultimate flex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like 3 years old talking like spitting facts on the mic. Damn.
I like it.
I like it too.
What's new in old Workland? We didn't really record the last couple weeks, so I feel like I haven't talked to you guys for months now. That's what it feels like.
It feels like it was yesterday, but yesterday was so long ago.
Yeah. It's like both at the same time.
Jason's giving me his look. He has certain looks he gives me. I'm very good at picking up on like facial patterns. So he's giving me his, what you just said made no sense to me. Look, am I picking up on that?
You tell me you're the one that has the really good facial
You're right. I regret saying that. What is up? I don't know. Jason and I have been busy as hell.
Yeah, but getting nowhere.
And getting nowhere, but somewhere. I feel like I've done nothing in the past 2 months, and yet I have done an amazing amount of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's how I feel too, but mostly because my coworker on the project gets so much done every day before I even wake up.
Yeah.
Just like basking in his success.
It is wild, that coworker. Damn machine.
Shout out Mario.
Envious, honestly. Just imagine like you could be consistent, right? If I could be consistent, I feel like I could code like that. But I never will.
We had a meeting with our CTO, Jamie, Monday or Tuesday. Basically like, hey, we've run into this problem. There's no way to solve it. We've tried so many things. And then that wasn't good enough for Mario. He didn't like that we couldn't solve it. And so he solved it.
Yeah. He is that guy.
Yeah. We have a lot of projects at Podia that all are one big project, but that I don't think we can talk about yet. But hopefully we can soon.
But it's all coming to a head on our heads. Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked last week about the new GemX stuff in RubyGems, and I actually tried it.
Fill me in on that. I don't know what the feature is. I don't think.
Do you know about NPX, which we went over last week?
Yeah, like the NPM replacement.
What Connor on Twitter let us know is that the way NPX works is that you don't have to have a node modules folder. Like that's the point of using NPX. Like I run NPX prettier and pass it a file path and it runs prettier on that file. I don't have to have a node modules folder to use prettier if I use NPX. And the way that works, according to Connor Rogers, is it I wasn't going to say anything because I was like, because this long pause will just get edited out and it won't matter. But then I couldn't find it. Okay, I found it.
I hope it stays in, all of it.
No, put edit, please, someone. Okay. The way NPX works is it installs the node module into a global cache and then searches for the binary and runs it. I don't know how often the cache gets cleared. Also, if NPX determines the node module already exists in your global cache, it'll run it without the network request. Although it'll usually do a quick network request to determine the latest version if you don't specify one. So if you want to use a specific version, you do like npx prettier at 1.2.3 and then the command. So we didn't understand that part last week. So now we do. And RubyGems just added a feature that is very similar to this. So if you're on the latest RubyGems version and bundler, you could run gemexec rails generate scaffold bibbidi bobbidi boobidi bobbidi. If it exists in the cache, because I assume that there is some sort of caching feature just like that. I didn't read through all of that in the PR, but then it would just try to like see if that exists in the cache and then use that command. So you wouldn't have to run gem install rails or bundle install rails in that project.
Fascinating.
Better use case is like you are writing a Ruby script and you want to run standard on it. So you just do gemexec standard and pass it the file. That's it. Yeah, Chris doesn't care.
But he's
unfazed, unbothered. This guy is so zen.
But it's a local dependency to the project, or
no? That's the point.
It's available on your system.
What? Because I can gem install standard and then just run standard from anywhere.
But you don't have to gem install standard.
Okay, but it has to install standard. So
globally, once.
I don't get the use case because it seems the same
now
as gem install standard.
Now I'm confused. Perfect.
Yeah. I have no idea what this is or why it exists. Just have to bring Connor back.
It makes so much sense to me.
Until you explain it?
Until you explained it. It made so much sense to me until you explained it.
I was like, but we already have this feature.
If you have standard in your project.
Yes.
And then you have standard in your system.
Yes.
Which one does it use?
Which command to use?
Exactly.
You would either run standard or bundle exec standard or bin standard.
I'm so perturbed at least that you've exposed this about what I understood.
The patterns in Ruby of like, if I just run a command without going through bundler, it will use the global version, or going through bundler will use the local version. GemExec sounds like is it or is it not going through bundler? I guess GemExec maybe does check if bundler, there's a gem file.
Hold on.
But it's weird now because every other command always uses bundler, but bundler is part of RubyGems now or whatever. So, well, I don't know.
Okay.
But for node world, maybe that'll make sense, but I don't know what GemExec exactly does over.
So this feature
bundler
adds an easy way to run executables, specifically executables from gems that may or may not be installed.
Okay.
And there's an RFC attached, and it basically says that add a gemexec subcommand to RubyGems that will handle installing, if necessary, and running an executable from a gem or on RubyGems or the user's configured gem server, regardless of whether that gem is currently installed.
And then does it install it? I wonder. I guess.
The gemexec command can be thought of as a shortcut to running gem install and then the executable from the installed gem. For example, gemexec rails new period will run rails new in the current directory without having to manually run gem install rails, only to run rails new once and no other rails commands, because the rails new then generates a gem file. So they have an example with using CocoaPods Okay, here's
that
a
is
good
a name
example.
haven't heard in a long time.
Here's an example. What if you wanted to run like a gem that does something to text, but you don't even install it, you just want to run it once? This would be like kind of the way you do that. Or if you want to run like OctoKit on something like from the command line. This is also a nice way to like circumnavigate certain issues with like scripting where you have to know whether something is installed or not in order to use it. So like if I have like an Alfred script and
I think that's where it's like
installed,
really useful. But I think from the description, it sounds like it does install it. Because it's a shortcut for gem install. So like it would be a global install of whatever, which is cool. So that's neat.
So GemX will use its own gem path to install gems and will attempt to load the requested binary from the existing set of gems. If the binary is not found, the command will install the gem by default of the same name as the binary, though it can be set by a command line option, and then activate and execute the binary.
Okay. I guess that's cool. I mean, it's not a whole lot different than gem install standard, but
so there's already
there's customizations for that maybe.
There's already a gem that apparently exists called GemX that people are currently using to get this sort of behavior, which I will put a link to in the short note. Ever wanted it to be easy to run a command? This happens to come with a gem. Yeah.
You said short notes.
Because I mumbled. Show notes. I think I understand now.
Yeah. Okay. I don't ever do stuff like that very often, so that's interesting. But I can kind of see like the VS Code standard extension could just like not care if standard's in your gem file, because then it could just run always the latest version of standard that way, and that would be cool.
And it would be saved in like that path, so it wouldn't have to install it every time. It would just like, hey, is this here? No. Okay, install it. Yes. Okay, we're good. Just use it.
That's neato. I haven't never needed that myself, but maybe I will find a hammer to use that nail.
Well, I wrote a gem a long time ago that just printed out like a business card with like cool text to the terminal. And I was inspired by something in the Node community. So I rewrote it this weekend. So now you can write, if you're on the latest versions of RubyGems and Bundler, you can run gemexec Andrew codes, and it will just output my business card into the terminal.
Bet. Doing it right now.
Are you on the updated RubyGems? What version is this? I keep saying it because I don't.
I just gem updated -- system, and oh my god, fetching Andrew codes, and it worked.
RubyGems 3.4.7.
Wow.
So now, if I could just put that on my resume, for instance, like I could just say, "Hey, want to know more about me? Just run GemX Andrew codes."
Wait. You could put that on your real physical business card, and then have them download your actual business card.
Yeah, and put a little malware in there.
Which then says, please see Andrew codes for a physical business card.
Yeah.
Just infinite loop them.
Mail the following inquiry to this address.
With the check.
Yeah, obviously. And some Bitcoin.
I mean, that's kind of cool too. Just thinking about like, I just recorded a bunch of the Rails for Beginners content for Rails 7. And the first steps like install Ruby and then gem install Rails and then choose the version and then run Rails new. You could just like skip a couple steps and gem exec Rails new and voila, you're off to the races.
Yeah, because then once you're inside,
I like it.
We'll use the gem file.
That's cool. Okay. You've convinced me that it's got some interesting potential.
Okay.
I like that it's kind of knowledgeable about the gem file and bundler. Like it's not just purely the global executables. Neato bandito. What else is new this week?
This will be old news in a week, but Twitter just released the algorithm, and I'm trying to see if they'll accept a pull request to boost the three of us in Twitter.
Yeah. Hold on, I haven't seen this little algorithm they got.
It's
how many lines?
How many if statements is it?
It's a lot of Scala.
I mean, I probably could read Scala, right?
It's got some Python in there.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty cool that they published that, but I wonder how much abuse is going to come out of that, where it's like, oh, you definitely overlooked these situations.
I like how they just called it the algorithm.
That's like when my parents call it the McDonald's or the Walmart.
What I'm getting out of Scala so far is a lot of nesting.
there's this file, this home tweet type predicates. I don't know how to read Scala, but there's a whole thing that's like author is power user, author is Democrat, author is Republican.
Is there really?
Author is Elon.
Okay, it makes even more sense now. Not the dark request, bro. Hell nah.
Oh yeah.
All right,
So,
Can you submit a pull request to this?
Yeah, it's on GitHub. So
I mean,
Got a lot of issues.
I can't wait to watch for the troll PRs.
got
I bet there's a bunch of
$24. Upgrade timeline with better content. Let's look at the
Rewrite
file
with
change.
parts.
It's
Rewrite in
person-
COBOL.
This person replaced author as Elon with their own Twitter handle.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Excellent.
Oh, this
That's
is
interesting. How can you just classify? Wait, what is Snowflake ID? Interesting.
someone opened a PR that is remove all ads from feed.
Nice.
Here you go.
I'll go hit a thumbs up on that.
This is going well.
Dude, I'm so happy. Their code was been on GitHub for like the past like couple of months. Did y'all hear about that? They fired one of their engineers, and that engineer shouted to that person because that person's my hero. That person's like, F y'all, and just uploaded the source code on GitHub, and it's just been there. It just sat on GitHub for a bit.
Someone opened a PR that's just a single white space added, and the PR description is a job posting somewhere else.
Nice. That's big energy right there.
This is fun.
This is fun. I'm glad this is so important in our society for some reason.
One PR is called an actual fix.
Is it really? Is it actually a fix? What if someone just fixed the code, bro? Oh, he failed to insert key value pair. He changed it to failed to get. Oh, he actually is right, dude. This person is right.
There's one that
person is
says
correct.
make numbers more accurate, and it's replaced every single number in the code base with 420.
Nice. The guy smokes weed.
I mean, every number. If it's greater than 0, no. Is it greater than 420?
Nice. Hope he doesn't
Wow.
break anything for his PR at the company. Untitled looks good to me. This is good. I'm glad you reminded me about this.
I'm glad we could go through it together right now in the middle of recording.
Yeah. I'm glad I could get my first contribution to the Twitter algorithm today.
Oh,
Oh, amazing. I love it. It's so chaos. I don't know. What else is new?
Chris, you're so loud today between the keyboard clacking and the chip eating.
I haven't eaten much. I'm a mess today.
How was office
Sorry.
hours?
They were good. I recorded a podcast before that. So then we're recording now, and I've just been a lot of recording today. And then I've been re-recording the Rails for Beginners stuff. And that was all week. And I recorded like half of it. And then I got sick and then had a super bad sore throat. So I like never finished it. And then I just threw it away and redid it. And then we had a couple trips to the ER last week, and it's been a wild month. I'm glad to be back to normal. But then kiddos in our infant daycare class are getting COVID, and then
Again?
we're like, oh yeah. My sister got COVID, I think, yesterday. She started to come down with fever and all the same COVID systems as she had last time. And then we are a week from today leaving for Italy for vacation, and just going to stay in my bubble from now until then so I don't get anything before we go. Yeah. There's an interesting situation that I can and talk about, like that's technical, that thought was very disappointing. I don't think it's really a Rails issue, but my Rails for Beginners course, I did all this work to build basically the first project's like, let's build a blog and teach you routes and models and views and controllers and walk through all this stuff. And towards the end, I'm like, you know what? Screw it. Let's take a look at action text. Like, we built a blog with a regular text column, but it kind of sucks. We can't upload images. We can't do anything. But here's this really cool feature of Rails. 2 features, because of course, active storage is required for action text. So I sit there recording until midnight, all those stupid little course configuration things and all this stuff, just to get it perfect to work. And I re-record it like 4 times because make one little typo in your course configuration or any of those things, and it just blows up. And then it's like, error, but of course, no information on why for most of that. And I was like, I already used DigitalOcean Spaces, so we'll use that in the example. I record the entire video and finish it, and I'm just recording the conclusion. Everything works perfectly. Super excited. And I upload an image. I go to show the blog post, image renders. I'm like, so that's it. We've built our first blog and we're using this really awesome feature of Rails, action text. And I happen to just click edit so that I could show like, we can go and upload another file. And I click edit. That freaking file is broken. And I go down this rabbit hole and I find out, and there's some old posts in the Rails issues about this. DigitalOcean Spaces is S3 compatible, but it doesn't fully map exactly to the public ACLs. So like for the blog, I'm like, we don't need our images to require a token. It's a blog. So everything we upload, we can make it public. So I set public as true and everything works except for edit. And I noticed something was weird because I uploaded an image and there's like 2 copies in DigitalOcean Spaces. And I thought first it was like a variant or whatever. And I think it actually does upload a variant right away, one for like the editor and one for the regular display or something, or the original version, and one for the gallery, maybe in action text. But anyways, the original file gets uploaded perfectly fine. It's what's displayed when you render the action text stuff, and it is a public one. It gets created publicly just fine. Somewhere later on down the line, when that variant or whatever gets created, it is uploaded, but it is not marked as public. And there's either it's the original image. I didn't check because it was basically like the same image in both files. It was like the same size. I don't know exactly what the difference was, but one of them was uploaded as public and one was private. And so like all this work I had spent hours on, I was like, I could absolutely just edit this a few seconds out of the video and pretend nothing happened. But like, I was pissed. And then I start reading and it's like, yeah, there's an extra header or something you need to include for this one request. And you can monkey patch the Ruby code or the JavaScript code. And here's some monkey patches that are left in the Rails issues for DigitalOcean Spaces. And I was like, in your first Rails for Beginners series, building a project, I do not want to include a JavaScript or a Ruby monkey patch. So I said, screw it, threw everything away, and then redid it all with Amazon S3 and pretended nothing happened. I was like,
that blows.
I hate it. But it makes sense that you're using something, cloning Amazon's protocol and using their S3 backend code and whatever. So it may not be perfect, but man, I wasted so much time on that. And I don't want to give a new person in our community, I don't want to give them that experience. The first tutorial you follow has to be monkey patched to use this feature. It's terrible. But I really probably think the issue is more DigitalOcean than anything else.
I don't get to see Chris rage often. It's kind of my favorite thing.
This is like a teddy bear rage.
You should have seen me that night. And then I wake up at 4 a.m. because Jackson's crying and I never went back to bed. And then
he was using Spaces too, wasn't he?
Or was he using tabs?
Oh, you better nip that in the bud, dude.
You will not live in this household if you use tabs in your editor.
Hell no.
Oh, man.
My boy doesn't use tabs.
I just want to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Honeybadger. They are not only my favorite error and uptime monitoring service, but they've also added several awesome new features. One of those being the public status pages. So it makes perfect sense that your error and uptime monitoring tool can have a public status page for you to communicate any downtime outages with your customers. So whether US East 1 is down or you forgot to add a configuration file, Honeybadger is there for you to help communicate any downtime or outages with your customers. Plus, they've also added SSL certificate monitoring. So like many of us use these days, Let's Encrypt certificates expire every 90 days. And if for some reason you're a week away from expiring an SSL certificate, they can let you know ahead of time so that you can take care of it without any outages for your customers. Plus, managing the errors and things inside of Honeybadger has gotten even easier with Honeybadger Actions, which you can use to automatically assign errors to yourself or another team member, add tags to different error classes, and more. And they also have batch actions, which you can use on the search results to help manage your backlog of work to do. So Honeybadger is the place to check out for error and uptime monitoring, and it's only getting better. So check them out at honeybadger.io. Is CORS really something I want to explain to beginners as one of their first projects? And it wasn't too bad because Rails guides are way better than they used to be, where they actually have good examples of the CORS configuration. You just copy paste and dump into Amazon. It's just the problem of you also need to create policy, but the policy instructions are in like a little yellow warning box or like a note thing. And it's not like an actual, you need a user and you need a policy. These things need to be probably also scoped to your bucket, and you need to set up all that. And of course, the first couple times I recorded the stupid thing, it's like I checked, what was it, put bucket ACL instead of put object ACL as I'm recording and didn't even notice. And, you know, I get to the very end of the video and like drag and drop and upload the file and 403. And then you go click on there and it's like access denied. And you're like, yeah, but denied for what? Where do I go to see the logs when something went wrong and determine that? But no, you don't really get a good look into any of that. So fingers crossed, it's beginner friendly, but I thought it would be really impressive to like your first Rails app. We do the simple version of this, but then we throw that away and replace it with the cool, exciting feature of Rails, which is action text. Like it's pretty impressive that you get that out of the box and all that fancy stuff. But there's a fine balance between getting in the weeds and tutorials and staying on the happy path, but still showing something advanced-ish or whatever. Like action text as a user doesn't feel advanced, but actually wiring up all the storage stuff is, and the JavaScript. And I think the CSS and JS generators, now they have how many different ways of, you've got Webpacker, you got import maps, asset pipeline for your CSS. You could be using Tailwind, CSS Rails. You could be using whatever. And the installers aren't necessarily going to drop it in the exact right place. Or like what happened with us is we're using Tailwind CSS Rails to get Tailwind, and then it generates the action text CSS file and includes it in your Tailwind stuff, but it doesn't ever render because the tricks code in action text CSS is using the asset pipeline like require thing. So Tailwind doesn't know what to do with that and it just ignores it. And Rails still needs a better, it's unfortunate because the options means that lots of that stuff is going to break because you now have to build a factorial amount of, you know, your generators have to be like way more complicated for every single option. Every one you add adds more complexity. And I think while I love and embrace, you know, the flexibility on your assets in your JavaScript, it is also one of the major downsides right now of using Rails as a beginner because it's like just a freaking mess. It's unfortunate.
The first main Rails course I took did S3 uploads, but with like paperclip or something like that.
Yeah. Well, this will be better than that at least.
Well, exactly. So all that to say, like, it's interesting to do that work when you're just learning because you kind of get to see like it's freaking complicated and you don't understand what you're doing, but it gives you an opportunity to like expose you to like these concepts. Like you may not know what CORS is. You may not know about this. So
it is good exposure. It is one where I was like, I think I tried to mention that it was like, look, I'm a senior Rails dev or whatever. I don't have a real job, so I don't have a real title, but someone who's been doing Rails for 12 years still struggles with setting up your CORS configuration fine the first time. And this is a good exposure to it. Reference the docs. Make sure that you double, triple check every little thing that you're doing here. You will figure out what you did wrong. Like one time I put 127001:300 instead of 3000 and it wouldn't upload. And it was like, oh my gosh, all these little nuances, but it is showing those little sneak peeks of like, this is what you'll do in a professional environment. You will have to use S3 or something like that for production. And that's just good exposure, even if it feels a little painful at the beginning. that's okay. Because I was like debating that, and we could use local disk storage for stuff, and that's where it feels magical when you just install it locally, and it's like, oh my god, the file's uploaded perfectly.
Yeah.
Then I show deploying it to production, and like, oh, my files are gone. Dang it, what happened here? And then you have to explain like your production environments are in containers most of the time, or normally for the majority of hosting providers. And then this is why that is a thing, and this is why we need to address that. And I went back to and remembered the intro videos. They're like, hey, you want Ruby and VS Code, and we'll install Rails, and we'll go do that. And then when you go to production, you deploy it, and it's like, hey, your Rails master key is missing. Run the Rails credentials edit command. And I, in the video, just instinctually copy paste, run it in my terminal, and edit the credentials, and, I'm done. But then I came back later and was like, got to set my editor and tell the editor to use VS Code -- wait. And you can't use that unless you go into VS Code first and install code in your path. So I went back to the very first video and also added a note for that or whatever. And it's like, this stuff is exhausting. As much as I would love it for this all to be beginner friendly, it is still very much not. And there's not a lot of solutions for that. The Rails credentials thing can't not have you set the editor. Like, that command has no idea what editor you're using. So it's a pain. But, maybe that's one of those situations where we need one of the Rails extensions in VS Code will set that up for you or something, or be able to do a -- wait automatically. So you could just install this Rails VS Code extension and it handles that or whatever. There's little shortcuts like that. I think just need some polish, but enough ranting on all that. I can't wait to get this stuff published, because the old Rails for Beginners course is still great, but it's 2 years old, and Hotwire's the default now. And people love that course, but it's kind of annoying to have to go and learn that you need to add the unprocessable entity status to all your error handling in the controllers and whatever. So it'd be nice to ship a new version of that. Colin's been working on almost 6 hours or something of Ruby beginner content, which we've never done before. So that is going to drop here in a week or two or so, maybe around RailsConf, maybe before. Depends. He's moving this weekend, so it depends on when he gets all those exported. We get them uploaded, but that's going to be killer. That's all going to be, I think pretty much all of it's going to be free, because it's prerequisites to learning Rails. So we want you to learn Ruby. Eventually we'll do some SQL, some HTML, some CSS, maybe explain browser things like your JavaScript console and how to debug some JavaScript. Maybe we'll have a little intro to JavaScript as well. Who knows? So we're planning on really expanding our curriculum, or for the first time, instead of the weekly screencasts that are on semi-random topics, we're going to have an actual curriculum that you can walk through start to finish. And I'm excited for that. A lot of people have asked for that over the years. So that's our first official hint at that dropping here soon. Maybe I'll get it live before this episode goes live. So you'll have to check out Go Rails and see if we did it or we didn't. Who knows?
Find out next time.
Yeah, find out and see.
That's cool. It's been cool to see how you've expanded your content once you started bringing more people into the fold to help you manage everything.
Yeah, it's cool. The content is pretty exhausting to record. Colin's been working on that for at least a month. I know he was working on the web pages for the new curriculum stuff as well before recording, but it took him a long time to record the 6 hours, and it took me a really long time to record I think the blog series is 4.5 hours right now, but we do everything from scratch. We write every get, route, post, put, patch. We add names manually, and we show all of those things purely from scratch. And then at the end, we're like, oh, did you know there's this resources shortcut that generates all that for you, and really teach you all the basics and how they work or whatever. So that content takes a long time to record, because you're like, oh, if I have to explain what a controller is, we have to explain that it inherits from this other thing, action controller, and this is where params and before action and all these other magical things come available, but you don't see them imported anywhere. And it's a lot to balance. What should we expect that you know as you're doing this? And what do we explain as we go along? And striking that balance is hard. So that's kind of why the new Rails series is going to be building like 5 or 6 or more projects. I think I have a list of like 10 different Rails apps that we're probably going to build, and having sort of the repetition to be like, we're going to learn routes 7 times in a row. And at the end of this, you should have a pretty good understanding of how to write routes and not have to look at the documentation that much anymore. You should know the basic options and what you would normally see there. It'll be good, but man, there's a ton of work. I tell you what.
That's how I learned. I did a course on Udemy I did several small tutorials, but the one on Udemy like sticks out to me mostly because that's the one I got the most value out of. And it was building like several small Rails apps, and they kept incrementing in size. And the final one I turned in for my final project in college.
That's awesome.
Because the teacher was like, I need you to write an app that has these types of SQL calls in it. I do remember this. There was specifically one type of call that I couldn't figure out how to make active record do. And I was an intern at a shop that I would later join after college. And I walked in and asked the developers, I need to make this type of SQL call. And they were like, why would you ever need to make that type of SQL call? They told me how to do it, and I printed off the Rails logs and gave it to my teacher.
You just gave me an idea of, as the teacher, if you have a bunch of startup ideas, you can just give these very strange, specific requests for the students to build this very specific app. And you're like, just take that when they're done. They graduate and disappear, and it's now my Uber clone.
This semester, every college professor is like, so we're going to work with some AI this semester, or some AI programs.
We're going to do some AI image generation, and I definitely need you to implement Stripe.
Yep.
Here's the API keys to use.
Yep. Don't worry about what it's for.
I love it. There's an interesting one that turned into a screencast for Go Rails and stuff and became an update to our API clients in Jumpstart. We basically set up the API clients to kind of ignore the response for the most part as your return value. So when I like hit the GitHub or whatever API, normally the only thing you care about is the actual like JSON that was parsed out of there. It's pretty rare that you look at headers for anything like application wise, but our API clients by default will make those requests and would like trash the request headers and stuff and just give you the body that was parsed. And that was fine until you start realizing that like, oh, pagination is often, a lot of APIs will include like pagination as the link header on GitHub or like whatever other headers might be in the response for like rate limiting too. So we ended up like refactoring that so that our API requests will return the response object. So then your actual client can be the one that gets rid of the headers, but it can like loop through and check for rate limiting and retry and stuff. So the clients you implement can make use of the headers, but really just return the data that you care about retrieving. But one of the things with that was like, we get the net HTTP response object, which is like a HTTP OK or something. And it became kind of weird because you're like, I want to provide a way for them to like have the JSON already parsed, because I don't want them to always have to make a request and then parse the JSON and have this separate variable where we got the response and now we have the parsed JSON. And it was a cool little screencast because I used the simple delegator class in Ruby, which I don't think enough people know about, but it's kind of like a built-in class that you don't even have to implement like an initialize method. That's already done for you. So you instantiate a class that inherits from simple delegator. You say new, pass in your object, and you can add methods to that. And that will even go as far as when you like inspect and it says like, you gave me a to-do in a to-do decorator that's a simple delegator. When you have the to-do decorator object and you print it out in like Rails console or IRB, it'll say it's a to-do, even though it's actually a to-do decorator. So there's some thing internally that like renames it and pretends to be the original object, even though it's not, which is really neat. I don't know how they do that internally, but that was one where I was like, you know what? We'll just wrap the response from NetHTTP, add the parsed body to it, where we can parse the JSON, or if it's XML, we can parse that, or any other format. And now we just enhanced it with this method, and you can use that to just make a quick decorator in 2 seconds. But then the other thing I don't think people know is you can include modules on individual instances of a class. So we did that too, and it's like the exact same thing. We just make this module and include that on our response instance, and voila, we have the parsed method body as well. So it's like 2 cool examples of sort of how to make decorators. And then Thoughtbot has an excellent blog post on those approaches and variations of that, and like pros and cons. So they have like a example where it's like you want to add milk and sugar to coffee, and you have a coffee object that has a cost, and it's like $2. And then if you add milk, it's like plus 2 cents, and sugar is plus 4 cents. And it shows how you can like basically decorate the coffee with milk and sugar. And like if you use the include module thing, you can never include 2 milks. But if you use the decorator thing, you could have it wrapped as many times as you want with milk and add to that, and like all the pros and cons of those different approaches, which I thought was cool. Because there was the Gilded Rose Kata. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
James Edward Gray II solution for that is one of the coolest things that I had ever seen when I was like learning Ruby. And his solution was basically refactoring this code challenge, and he's including modules on instances. And I'm like learning Ruby, and I've only seen include of a module on a class. And he's doing that, and it like beautifully solves that kata. And it blew my mind when I saw that the first time, because I was like, you can do what? You can add methods to an individual instance and not all of them? That's wild. For anybody who is not familiar with that stuff, it's super cool. And we'll have a link to I think I can find his solution in the kata, but also the Thoughtbot blog post. And that video will go live on GoRails pretty soon too. Ruby's magic. I love it. It's so elegant, and you can do so many things that you wouldn't expect that you could do. So cool.
Ruby is magic.
The best. Can't live without it.
Don't want to. That's all I got.
Well, yeah, that's all I got too.
I have nothing Ruby related that's happened this week, really. Just been writing maintenance tasks. I have to take Trix content and traverse it into chunks. And anywhere there's like an image or a file upload. So I have to take it and be like, if you've got an image, let's say you've got like 3 paragraphs an image, 2 paragraphs a file. So I traverse that, and those first 3 paragraphs are a chunk. The image is a chunk. The next paragraph is a chunk. The file is a chunk because of like tip-tap migration stuff we're doing. So I figured it out. It is maybe some of the worst code I've ever written in my life, but I figured it out.
Nice. I heard some bad code too this week. It's friggin' sweet though.
Yeah. I think I find the more I write code, the less I care about it being this perfect statue. The thing I keep finding is I do like abstractions, but I never get them right.
Yeah.
Like at the beginning. And I just feel like I spend more time untangling abstractions than I do writing valid business code sometimes.
Would you say your abstractions are distractions?
I would say 100%.
That's a little zesty. Like that. I want that on a shirt.
I probably wouldn't win any awards or be a cool programming influencer.
You are a programming influencer.
Writing boring code now, and I love it.
Boring Rails.
Duplicated code. Just
dude, my copy
committing all the crimes.
So that's fine. I almost committed like 800 put statements today. So that's how deep my feature got.
It's a lot easier for me to find and replace duplication than it is to untangle or add to the wrong abstraction.
Yeah, this dude just casually regexes in front of me like it's no big deal, and it really triggers me.
When did I do that?
You did it not long ago. We were on a call last Friday night. You also did it a time before. Just regexing in front of me like it's no big deal. Like, bro, put your guns away.
regex was the thing I understood the least when I got started programming. And I remember when I was learning PHP, Jeffrey Way saying, like, regex is one of the most powerful tools as a programmer. And for years, I thought that man just has reached a state of enlightenment I will never get to. And then I just started casually learning regex, like as I needed it. And it's like compounded.
I've learned regex several times, but I can never remember it when I need it. And watching you do it just casually makes me want to like figure it out again. And that pisses
really
me off. I know
powerful.
every program is a regex under the hood. I've said that many times. There's always, if you drill down to the very, very core, there's a regex somewhere.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.